This is Zero Signal, where security leaders stop waiting for certainty and start leading through it. I'm Conor Sherman.
And I'm Stuart Mitchell.
Let's get into it. Zero Signal is brought to you by Sysdig. Threat actors are compromising cloud accounts in under 8 minutes. Vulnerabilities are being exploited within 10 hours of disclosure. That's the defender's window, and it keeps closing. Attackers aren't waiting on dashboards. They go straight for what's running. Real time is the only timeline that matters. And that's why Forrester named Sysdig a leader in its latest wave for the cloud-native application protection platforms. Runtime is where real risk shows up, and runtime is what Sysdig is built for. So stop watching and start defending. Learn more at sysdig.com and check out the link in the description. Today on Zero Signal, we're speaking with Herman Errico, a product manager at Vanta who went looking for what actually secures AI agents at the moment it stops generating text and starts taking action. And he found that nobody had named it. So he wrote the paper, and that paper became a community. And that community is the Autonomous Action Runtime Management as part of the Cloud Security Alliance. It's a system category specification now housed under the Cloud Security Alliance with more than 85 companies supporting the new standard. He's taking stage at Black Hat on Tuesday with one message: the action boundary is the new security boundary. So today we're diving into why the tools you already have don't watch the moment the agent acts, how AARM became a new system category, first antivirus and firewalls, and now this, and how CISOs are benchmarking agent security vendors instead of just being guessing blindly, so that you as a security leader can walk into your next vendor conversation knowing exactly where that boundary is, how to govern it, and how to set your organization up for success. Herman, thank you so much for coming on the show. Let's just bust right into it. So I'm very excited to get into this standard. I get to goof and get technical for a little bit here. But what's really important is what I think this standard starts to do around actually moving us out of the dark ages of agentic AI security. So why don't we start with the origin story? Why did we need a specification here? What drew you to the problem space of building out this autonomous, action-oriented security standard so that we can get our agents around that? What drew you to this problem area?
Great question. And by the way, there's also, as of this morning, we have a bump in update. We got to 93 companies part of AARM, so
Let's
almost
go.
at 100.
That's amazing. Hearing it here on the podcast
I know.
first.
It's exciting.
Let's go.
It's really growing every single day. You can't really keep up with it. We have to maybe just add a dynamic widget somewhere on t-shirts. Starting with the problem. If you look at system categories are a great tool to enable practitioners to pair a problem with a solution. You mentioned the antivirus, right? If you think about the antivirus, you have a virus problem, right? You have a bunch of attacks happening. There's ransomware, there's different malware types. And we did solve that with an antivirus, which started as a signature-based, then evolved into behavioral analytics, then it became an EDR. But then the problem at the time was, okay, this new class of problem, here's a solution, and then everyone aligned on, you use these type of solution to solve this specific problem. And by doing that, you really can build up on the quality of the execution. Because then once you have a system category, everyone knows what to expect from signature-based detection, behavioral detection, and then you get more out of your solutions rather than just a single point-in-time solution that has been built by a single vendor. When analyzing the agentic security landscape, even before agent became so prominent, I started deep diving into the details of MCP security. What are the different security controls that you can recommend to companies to secure MCP servers? And then I started thinking about, okay, you can definitely implement a gateway. You can definitely implement DLP. You can implement a firewall. You can do input validation. But then the reality is that agents are really shifted to a new level, which is, sometimes they call it a level 8. So you have a layer 7, the application layer, and now we have layer 8, where the action of the agent happens. And no system today was really built to do pre-execution interception, do context accumulation. What are all the tool calls and what is the agent intent? So these primitives were really lacking among normal traditional security systems, which then draw me to the idea of like, okay, let's define this category. And this category is defined by the practitioners rather than by a industry analyst saying, okay, this is what the category is named about. We're going to draw a nice box where we're going to put a bunch of people inside.
I love that idea of we move to level 8 because it's so true when you think about like what we're doing now with agents is basically gather data, make decisions, take actions. It's the coordination, right? So when you think about like people at the application stack, we're starting to move that over. So I love this idea that we've been like kind of wedged in this layer 8. I'm going to definitely steal that language going forward. One of the things that you mentioned there was having practitioners create the standard instead of waiting for some independent analyst group recognizes a problem, create a box, a wave, or whatever, and then let the market respond to that. How has that been going from recognizing there's a net gap in the technical specifications, creating a community around it, and then seeing it go to now where we have 93 organizations who are coming alongside, endorsing and supporting this standard? What does that feel like for you as a product manager? What was that like to go from research paper to where you are now? Can you put us in your shoes a little bit?
Right now, my role is product manager, but I do come from a security engineering background, really having spent 10 years working in security operation and incident response and really seeing what runtime looks like when it comes to like traditional systems. I did write other papers in the past. Obviously, none of them were successful as this one. It definitely feels unreal to see companies like Okta, Rubrik, Microsoft wanted to collaborate with me and even Cloud Security Alliance approaching. It's like a single person going like, hey, we like your idea. It makes a lot of sense. Let's bring it as part of like our organization. So definitely very humbling, very exciting. There's a lot of like interest in the industry, but I think it's not really about what Herman, the person, did, but really what the community of builders that have seen the same problem are converging on. And that's, I think, the key component here, because the success of this project is really because 93 companies and even more have all realized a year ago, 2 years ago, agents will move from generating text to orchestrating actions. And then traditional security solutions were not built to understand that. Therefore, they started building something even before this concept of like pre-execution interception became a thing. And that's how they really got attracted to the idea of this project, because they were all building the same thing. And went like, hey, were you reading my Notion site? How could you know that I was thinking about pre-execution interception or semantic distance tracking? These are like very novel things, but I think it's great that a lot of people were really started to like think about their solution that way.
I also think it's something when the security community is at its best, it is essentially getting together to fix solutions. And not to say that we've lost our way by any means. I do think it is something the community does well, but it tends to come in ebbs and flows based on what we're facing as a challenge. And I think, at the end of the day, it serves us all if we do democratize these standards, right? And I think to Conor's point, and I'd love your take on this. Like, oftentimes we're dictated to us by regulating bodies what those standards are. Herman, I'd love your take on why you think and maybe it's happened by accident, but it's a great situation. What you think the upside of democratizing these standards are versus potentially them being dictated to us by a wider governing body?
Obviously, I think there needs to be a balance between everyone starting to go, let's standardize something and let's create a new standard, because then you get competing standard. There's a lot of confusion. But also, I do think on one end, protocols and standards are extremely slow to develop. And on the other end, practitioners are going add an insane amount of speed. If you think about how long it took the MCP specification to go from Anthropic defined it to now being a de facto standard on how you go and build agent interoperability, I think it's absolutely stunning to see that reaction. I do like maybe a balanced approach where it's the independent bodies that do come up with the specification, but then it's community updated so that the community can go in and provide feedback, give their perspective, and it's not slowed down by a 5-year cycle. For example, I love ISO standards. I was working at the British Standard Institution in a past life, but it takes them probably 5 to 10 years to come up with a standard. Now imagine if you go and create a agentic runtime security standard defined by ISO. It takes 5 years to develop. By then, we'll probably have AGI, and then it's going to be irrelevant.
Well, in the UK, they're still in a 5-year debate as to whether electric scooters are safe or not. So I think that gives you an idea of like sometimes you have to just figure it out, and sometimes regulation can be slow. And I think where we sit, I think the balance is key, right? I do think it's interesting. Conor, we talked about this when we had the Sysdig team on the podcast, which is actually AI adoption from a confidence level is actually higher in Europe because there's effectively more regulation. So I think these standards, like as we get better at these at security, like as security practitioners and leaders, and there being something to fall back on, I do think it will accelerate adoption. And obviously we live and breathe it every single day. So our assumption is that everyone's in this life now. It's not the case, right? Like there is still a fairly less people. More people don't use AI than use AI. And more like effectively, I would say like maybe 5% of people, even less, are really, really in it. Like they're deploying. So I think it's on us as security leaders to drive that. And look, I think initiatives like this are tremendous because it gives, a lot of our listener base, security leaders who are coming to us for some like, hey, what do I do? Where are my standards? Like, what can you drive for me? Things like this are like, for me, just the absolute gold standard.
I want to take us into the specification as well and like help our audience of security leaders like unpack the mechanics of what's happening under the hood. But to your point, Stu, like one of the things I really appreciate about what the outcome of a standard like this, about it being community led, is it's totally transparent, right? It's totally built in the open. It's built by community in the open. And so anybody can now start to hold either, if you're on the buying seat, you can hold other vendors accountable and say like, how are you holding yourself to that standard? And you can push your vendors. Or if you're bringing solutions to the market, you've got something to anchor and build around. And so I just really like the fact that we are creating the next generation of like, what does this mean to build a security agent for this agentic world that meets certain sets of criteria and thresholds. So you can, as a security leader, you've got a set of capabilities that are consistent and you can rely on them and you know what you get out of the box when you compare vendors 1, 2, and 3 if you're on the buying seat. Let's get into the specification a little bit. So you've got 93 different companies who are showing up and they're talking about ARM and they're saying we're throwing our weight behind this and saying this is the standard we want to align to and conform to. Why don't you step us into what does it mean for a company to adopt this standard? So again, a cybersecurity vendor company to adopt this standard, and then maybe walk us through what are some of the key attributes of this standard that you think are worth highlighting and underscoring.
Let's start from a number of examples on what I've seen. There's a person that at a plumbing company, so completely out of like the normal security kind of like background on how you go and build a company. He started building an agentic runtime security company because it was always like as a side project getting interested in wanting to solve the problem. Then there was a college student who decided, hey, I'm going to drop out of college and build this thing. And then there is a large company like Microsoft creating the agentic governance toolkit and then wanted to conform their solution to the AARM specification. Then there's like larger companies like Noma, who were the first one to adopt the specification and then wanted to run the conformance review. So you'll see like this different example of like The democratization of the process, where you have like large companies, small companies, very advanced startups, but even people that have never done this before and want to get involved. I think that's super exciting to see. And it's definitely going to bring new, fresh perspective on how to solve this type of problem, which is extremely new for everyone. But then going back to what the specification looks like and what are some of the key components which I think would be interesting to learn about is obviously the pre-execution interception. For you to be able to govern actions, you need to be able to intercept actions pre-execution. There's multiple ways to do that. You could do pre-execution at a ePBF kernel level. You could have a proxy, a reverse gateway. You can have hooks. You can have kind of like browser-based input validation interception. There's like different ways for AARM companies to intercept this action before it execute. That is in practice. Agent starts reasoning and goes, hey, the task is, I always love to make the copy change example. Task is Cloud Code, do go on this repo, change the copy of the landing page to say, here I am 2.0. Very simple. So Claude starts reasoning and then goes, okay, my plan is I need to go to this website and make a copy change. Obviously, before you can allow Claude to go and make a change or even push the code to the remote repo, you can intercept the action and then go, okay, I have now accumulated session context. I have the plan from Claude as machine readable data. I have the input from the user. And then I can apply some policies to say, okay, the user is authorized to run something. So the agent identity and the user identity. Then you start going, okay, the alignment is the scope of the work was to make a copy change. The agent is making a copy change. So you can apply both dynamic and static policies to say, yes, agent is allowed. So then you can allow the agent and the agent executes and then you generate logs. Or there's other scenarios, something that happened to me. I was instructing Claude to make a simple copy change. Claude got confused, started making other copy changes to other files, and then it did change 241 files. And it did change 10,000 lines of code because it was reconstructing some of the changes that it did not have in the local instance. Yep. Now, that is a clear example of, obviously, it did block the PR to be merged, so no problem done. But if you had pre-execution interception, you could really go, hey, the plan was one copy change, you're changing 250 files. Therefore, you need to be blocking this. The AARM specification introduces 5 different authorization decisions. Because normally in security, it's either it's allowed or blocked.
Right.
With agents, it's different. You can do allow block, but also you can do modify. So if the system blocks the action, keeps it on hold, then it can go to a human in the loop and say, hey, are you happy that Claude is about to change 241 files? Because you're on auto mode, you don't even realize what's going on unless you're there watching. And then you go, well, no, I didn't want that. So therefore you can instruct the agent to update that. That's modify action, or you can block it or defer. There's like various steps of solutions. That's essentially how it works from start to finish. The most interesting piece to me is obviously the context accumulation. Because if you can't accumulate context of a specific session, you don't really have the idea of intent, what the agent wants to achieve, and then what were the inputs and the output that it's trying to produce. That is probably the core component that modern security systems such as DLP, EDR, firewalls don't really have this computed agent intent. And that's the key, I think, differentiator of the AARM specification.
And I really appreciate the fact you guys went to that level, because we've had a few people on the podcast come through and we were talking about how there is the standard for the agentic trust framework. And it really is like laying the foundation of how do you bring a zero trust for your agents across the organization. So it's much broader than this particular specification. And one of the things that we talked about in that conversation was that it's actually that what's new about this moment than historical previous moments is intent, as you were describing, Herman. It's like, because historically, when we think about zero trust in an enterprise, it was, can you basically make your world smaller and smaller? So every authentication connection between service to resource were both endpoints authenticated. Okay, did you do authorization? Were you encrypted, and was your traffic going back and forth encrypted? Was the blast radius of compromise smaller and smaller? And you kind of make these worlds smaller, and they're all connected, which is great. It creates good plumbing. It creates a good foundation. And that's what your agent should be running on top of. But there is this like next level that you're describing, which is you can have all of the secure plumbing in the world, but if you don't know the quality of the water going through the plumbing, you don't know the intent, if you don't know why it's making those requests, you can still get yourself into a lot of trouble, right? I can confidently do the wrong thing. That is the world of AI right now, is we can confidently do the wrong thing. So I have this idea of having step up, where we can go and not just say block or permit, we can say, okay, let's start to compute the intention. I think that's really cool that you guys had that as a first class problem that was being solved in this specification. Zero Signal is brought to you by Hampton North. I've been responsible for building and turning around cybersecurity programs for companies where a lapse in security just isn't an option. Finance, high tech, AI. Different domains, but the same truth. The programs live and die on talent. And no strategy ships without the right people who share the right DNA. That's why I partner with Hampton North. I've built 3 cybersecurity teams with them, and every time they move faster than anyone else without sacrificing quality. While other agencies are still pushing paperwork, Hampton North already had vetted candidates in front of me. Their executive search is not one size fits all. With one of the largest networks of security leaders in the US, their leadership roles hit the market in days, sometimes hours. And their go-to-market practice covers CROs, CMOs, revenue leaders, and full team build-outs for scaling cybersecurity businesses. They meet every candidate, they reference every story. If you're ready to build and scale and grow your security program, go to hamptonnorth.com and see why brands like Clear, Instacart, Airtable, and OpenAI trust Hampton North to build great teams. Check out the link in the description.
I think human intent is really easy to spot, right? Like, bad things typically happen because there's malicious intent, or there's someone's an idiot. Like, they just don't have the skill set, right? I think with agents, as humans, we give instructions to agents and they do as they're told, but they don't necessarily know that the collateral damage on the way, and the context of that might be to edit 241 files and add 10,000 lines of code, right? So I think when we talk about intent, we have our own intent and how it looks and feels, and humans are pretty good at semi-communicating that to each other. As we talk about intent at an AI level, it does have that. So what we think we're relaying as intent is not necessarily the outcome that we always get. So I think that's where it's that clarification is so much foggier than we've ever historically been used to.
So Herman, as we start to think about, now there's a specification out there that talks about how to look in the agent and how to wrap around it these capabilities and these controls. Where do you see this going next? What's your hope and dream for this kind of specification?
If you look at the AARM, by the way, let's do a small parenthesis. There's 3 types of pronunciation for AARM. And right now, there's an ongoing battle between which one is going to be the de facto. Because there's AARM, and ARM. So we'll see which one is going to win.
Do you want us to put a user poll out and see what comes through?
I think we should, at some point, ask the community which one should be the de facto way to pronounce AARM.
Well, that's what you got to do on stage at Black Hat. Just split the room up.
We're gonna put it on stage at Black Hat.
ARM is what I would vote personally. I think AARM is after a couple of cocktails is going to be a challenge. So I think.
But then you got the conflict with the chip manufacturer. That's the one that goes in my head. It's the ARM chips
or an ARM, right?
I don't think about that.
Yeah,
there is precedent for this problem. Just so you know, and that is no one agreed on how to pronounce Linux for the longest time. And then Linus Revolts that is like, I wrote the thing. I put the code. I get to say how it's pronounced. So it's like, you can mispronounce my name all day long, but it's pronounced Linux. And so that's it. So you are, Herman, you are in the seat. You were in the Linus Revolt seat here.
Yeah, maybe I'll do that one day. I think I'm definitely watching from the sideline which one's going to be
It's your project. It's your research paper.
Yeah.
No sidelines for you.
Yeah.
Going back to read the name. So if you look at the name, it says autonomous action. It does not say agents. It does not say AI. And it's on purpose. Because if you think about it, 6 months ago, they were called co-pilots. Then we moved to agents. And sometime we'll have something different, which is maybe a humanoid robot or an autonomous vehicle or whatever it is. So what we want to govern is managing this autonomous action that happens without human intervention. That's the core component. I think my wish for the future is really that we adopt the specification from understanding what are the key components and what problem it solves, so that the moment you go, hey, I am going to build a robot that goes around your house doing chores, which obviously, please, let's build the thing, because that's the biggest problem on earth.
My goodness,
I don't need help with coding. I really need help with someone, doing my
folding
dishes.
laundry, please.
Folding laundries. But yeah, also help me with coding. Anyways, if you think about a robot going around your house, you can really apply the same components of AARM when it comes to a robotic action, because it's still like hey, I am looking at a laundry basket and I want to fold it. And then right now you're seeing a children, that is not a laundry basket. If you want to fold a children, that is absolutely not aligned with intent. And these are things that right now they seem a little bit far, but then that's the reality of like the future we're going, where there's going to be a lot of autonomous action. And then coming up with solutions for that is probably the main objective of the specification. But you know what's even cooler is that there's companies today, and I do speak with a lot of them every single day, that they're already solving some of these problems. There's a specific company, and then again, I'm not going to name names to support a neutrality, but there's some of them that have already created a way to compute execution patterns, to say they have, before the agent can execute, they block the action, they run a separate LLM to see what is going to be the output of where you want to go. And then based on that, they apply a decision. I think that's really cool, because it then
clever.
Removes some of the problems that you currently have today, which is computing all these policies. Because then you're going to go, okay, if the agent wants to make one copy change, it's making two, then you need to block it. But then that deterministic behavior needs to be computed. And then going into the full behavior, it becomes a little bit more complex, because then you can have a lot of false positives. So I think some of these patterns are extremely cool. And that's what I want to see emerging from the specification. That is, the builders are going to come up with a clever way, which is their way to do something. They're going to enforce the specification and give us feedback to say, well, pre-execution interception needs to be done this way because we've solved it in a specific way. Then that becomes a standard, and it raises the bar for the rest of the people that are building this solution, so that next time you're going to be building something, you will have even a stronger solution each time.
No, I love that. I really like that. And actually, I've seen people talk around this direction of computed trust before, like in computing, like these trusted action moments. But that's actually a really clever architecture that they've got in place. I'd be really interesting to see how they separate out the LLM such that the judge LLM doesn't get hijacked by the now rogue LLM. My brain goes down that path. Like, ooh, this is kind of an interesting architecture. I'll explore this.
You had a word that I wanted to hone on very deliberately. You mentioned the word neutrality. AAR very deliberately, it has not fallen under a commercial entity, right? It's under CSA, Cloud Security Alliance, for those who don't know what CSA is. What prompted you to make it effectively a non-commercial entity? And keen to know.
AARM started as a product manager for technical research. Obviously, you spend a lot of time trying to figure out, okay, what is the next thing that Vanta as a company needs to focus on? What are the big problems that we need to work on? And then building like deep research to understand these things at a core level, at a principal level, to then develop product around those. We could have gone, okay, we've invented something that it's pretty unique and make it a Vanta thing. But then we realized that that would have not been the right path, because the right path is make it available for everyone to use and improve. So then you get better outcomes on that. Because the moment you put something that is proprietary to a single company, then obviously you get a very small adoption, and then it becomes pay for play, and then there's no innovation. But then if you put it out there, everyone today can join the working group. We meet every Friday, every 2 weeks, and start giving feedback and say, well, no, I don't agree with that. And let's make this better. There's an analogy for this. I think Volvo, back in, I don't know, at some point, they invented the car seat and they had a patent for it. Rather than making every single car manufacturer pay for the car seat, they just give it out for free to everyone and go like, hey, guys, this is going to save lives. Go build a car seat. Obviously, I do hope that AARM is going to save lives, but I think right now we're probably going to save you some either tokens or some bad things to happen. So yeah, we wanted to make it extremely open and extremely available, because I think for that, we'll probably get better outcomes.
Volvo's also European. I imagine if General Motors or one of the other Americans, I don't know if they have the same mindset, but I do think it's an incredible analogy, right? Like if there's something out there that is, if someone stumbled on something, and again, it goes back to the security community is at its very best when it's sharing versus hiding away. So like, I love that analogy. I think it's great.
Yeah, the 3-point safety seatbelt invented by Volvo in 1959.
I'll ask Greg. He's about 100 years old, so he would have known.
1959.
There you go. But I love the fact that they're an aviation engineer into a car manufacturing. They're like, here's a safety thing, and then we delivered it. And then, of course, we can have the not so happy part of that conversation: how long it took the industry to adopt it, after all those decades. But that is a really good example of how you have an opportunity to level up the entire community around this. And this is where I think I want to give Jim Rivas, the president and co-founder of the Cloud Security Alliance, some praise and props. He has done a great job. I mean, the amount of times I go to do an executive briefing or a board presentation or something, and I'm stealing all these frameworks from the Cloud Security Alliance, like whether it's Maestro or it's the Agentic Trust Framework or now it's AARM. It's pretty cool, this community that's kind of flourishing under his tutelage, under his guidance, under his stewardship. That's what I was looking for. All right. So there is something else I want to talk to you about. We've talked about the specification for ARM, and I'm just going to go with the ARM until you tell me otherwise, Herman. We'll go to the ARM one here. Like we just talk about the specification for that and how it's needed for anything that's got autonomous action for it. There is this myth I'd like you to dispel, or there's a myth that I keep hearing, and maybe you like your take on it, which is, don't worry, Conor. If I give the right Markdown file to my coding agent, I'm going to get the outcomes that I want. I can govern Claude, I can govern Codex, Gemini through the right set of Markdown files. All right, so tell me, can we do this? What's your hot take here?
Okay, so I'm going to give you a bunch of hot takes here. So today, my company applies a global MD file that lives in my local Claude, and then that says, hey, XYZ not allowed, B very bad, etc. Now, me as a user, I can go in, ask Claude to look at that, find the file, open it in Visual Studio, delete it, and then just go as I please. So that is certainly something that I can do. So yes, Markdown files and skills do compete for attention. And then if you go back to the original paper, LLM, attention is all you need. You can have, there's a lot of like with harness, which is Cloud Code is an harness, ChatGPT is an harness. With harness, there's a lot of attention that it's needed by the LLM on different instructions. And then skills and Markdown files do compete for that attention, obviously. And then if you think about the illusion, so like one thing is like, yes, you can modify Markdown files. So probably I would not rely on runtime security on those. Second, LLMs are next token predictor machines. They are non-deterministic statistical models that do define, okay, based on what I'm seeing, this is the next token. And then that applies to actions as well. If you look at very advanced models, say Opus 4.8, Fable, Mythos, they have an hallucination rate between 36 and 50%. Lower models, it's 50% or even more. For complex tasks, is even more. The longer they operate, the less their context windows start shrinking, and then their need to recompact. So therefore, once you start competing for attention, those skills might lose in terms of priority with some of the action in the system prompt. Therefore, there's something that is called confused deputy. And there's also still normal attacks that do occur. That is a fraction of the security controls that you need to implement, but you need some layer of protection. And layers of protection come with the most bypassable is obviously MD files. Then you have application level interception, still bypassable because the agent can decide to code an API and go somewhere else or use a CLI. And I think the most bypassable ones are either gateways or ePBF, because obviously they go the network layer. There's no way around those. You get a simple 503. You're just blocked from, the agent doesn't even know that it's being blocked by something.
That makes sense. I mean, it's so sad because all those lovely, well-written Markdown files are just going to be abandoned. But I completely agree with you that you can't govern an AI fleet through a Markdown file for the exact reasons that you mentioned. That I think like the conversation makes sense when you start to get into the editing of it, but that insight of you're competing for attention is also really important not to lose the thread of. And I'm really glad you highlighted that, because if we're in a world where you're trying to feed more and more context into the context window and ask it to do more and more, then you do actually need something that's like independent of the same thinking machine to be the guardrails. And so you do need something outside, like you were highlighting, whether the network layer or the tool call layer, or really at the eBPF layer if you're on the endpoint. That makes sense. One other area I want to take this into is like we've talked a lot about the the community and the standard and why the alternative of like a Markdown file is not going to work. I'm kind of curious what you're seeing with these with the companies who are coming in here, because you've got there are some incredible names of companies that are putting themselves on the kind of volunteering themselves to be part of this community and help level standard. You've got RunLayer and Noma Security and Okta, and Sysdig is getting involved, and Mint and CPA. Like you have all these companies coming in and saying, okay, like we want to have a way of solving and helping this. How are you finding the community inside there with these vendors? Because there's a kind of a perception that like maybe they're getting in there and they're kind of like squabbling and fighting with each other, but maybe that's not the lived experience. Maybe when you get all these vendors and you get the sales teams out of the room and you get the engineers in the room, maybe there's very different energy and community. What's that like in the day-to-day of running this community that's taking off so well?
There's maybe three-part to this answer. The first one is I was really expecting some fights happening, but they never happen because it's all very eager engineers that want to collaborate. There's actually a lot of conversations between AARM companies that I did facilitate, and some people even decided to join forces and build together. And there's also part of the community, you'll get the builders, some of the engineers from the team. Obviously, the CEO of one of those companies that you just mentioned. Obviously, he's not joining the calls of the working group because obviously he's busy running a company. But engineers in their team, product managers, even just like enthusiasts of like these security communities are joining and they're giving feedback, they're adding their perspective, they're getting involved. I was very much surprised to see this like level of collaboration.
Mhm.
And I think we'll start seeing that more and more within certain communities that, yes, obviously, the two companies that you mentioned are competing. They are competing for the same customer base because they're solving the same problem. They're now actually going like pair to pair, going like, okay, this company is doing this feature, I'm going to do this feature, and then I'm going to prioritize X, Y, Z. That's like pretty normal. But then there's like a very healthy competition here on it's going to be all down to execution.
Totally it is. And you let them just like do their thing. But I think what is great again is it's like, it's what you said earlier, it's raising the bar here. So as we start to wrap here, I know you've got your talk coming in Black Hat. Is there any inside scoop you want to give the audience? We're going to release this episode the Friday before. So if you want to leave a little teaser, so the people who are listening will show up on Tuesday. What's the big idea you want to share at the stage on Black Hat? I'd love to get an inside scoop on that talk.
Yeah, obviously, Camille and I are going to chat about agentic runtime security. We're going to do a exploration about what comes even before AARM. Because there's like a bunch of questions that you need to ask yourself as a company, especially around what am I delegating? What am I giving out to my agents? Because then you can apply a lot of runtime security solutions on top of that. But then when you have AI employees, hopefully we're never going to have AI employees, but maybe at some point we'll have like the agents that do that people do orchestrate. And then what are you delegating to them? And then who's responsible? Who's accountable? Those are some of the things that we'll want to talk about. Obviously, layer 8 is going to be a big thing. And maybe we'll end up with knowing how do you pronounce AARM?
I think that's going to be the big takeaway for Black Hat.
I guess question that I would love to know. Let's say we're doing this same podcast 12 months from now. What is the standard? What does the community look like in 12 months in an ideal world for you? I know you're probably kind of a little bit caught up in the avalanche of it all right now, but have you taken a moment to think about what you'd like this to be a year from now?
A year from now, I would love someone to develop a piece of hardware that runs a AARM solution on top of it.
That would be very cool. That would start to realize your vision of that this is not just agentic, it's autonomous.
Because I'm starting to see one key insight, which is when it comes to agentic, when it comes to robots, some companies have solved the problem of the hand. The hand is the most difficult thing to build in a robot, which is you solve the hand, you can go and really execute robots at scale, which makes me think that robotic and AI and LLM are going to be a thing pretty soon. So I definitely would love to see a piece of hardware that runs an AARM solution. So any company out there solving that, this might be an interesting one. We'll see in 12 months' time if I'm right.
I love that. And by the way, I think we're like 5 years away from like having real robots hit the floor and like start to be more generalized. I think it's really around the corner. It's one of those things like how Transformers unlocked LLMs, and then all of a sudden, boom, they're everywhere. And we're gonna have that kind of moment here soon.
And that's where you go back to like, we talk about it saving a life. There is a realistic situation where in a hardware device saves a life, right? And that's pretty nice. Like of all the things you can actually do in the life, like from a legacy perspective, if you've saved someone's life at the end of the end of days, like feel pretty good about that, right? There we go.
Oh my God, like my entire career is just now in nothingness compared to like your vision for the next 12 months.
I've never even been
exactly.
Close.
Connor's just
calling
a dude.
my name on an airplane when there's like, is there a doctor? I'm like, does anyone know how to place cybersecurity professionals? Is not something the captain's ever said.
exactly.
So I gotta live with that.
Dear God, do we have a CISO? Do we have a CISO on board? Just like,
do we have a CISO in the room? That's going to be exciting.
All right, guys. So I think we're going to wrap it there. Herman, thank you so much for coming on the show today. It's been a real pleasure having you. I just love seeing how this community has developed everything from a research paper to a donation to the Cloud Security Alliance, to a nothing, to a 93 companies now participating in conforming with now what is the industry standard for autonomous action and how to secure that. So again, thank you so much for coming on the show today, Herman.
Thank you for having me. This has been a great conversation.
If today's conversation gave you something useful, a framework, a question worth sitting with, a way to position something you're already dealing with, that's the point. Connect with Conor and I on LinkedIn. The links are in the show notes. Tell us what landed.
And if you know another security leader who's navigating the same pressure, text them this episode. We'll see you next time.